Chapter 15 of the surprising adventures of Bampfylde Moore Carew, King of the Beggars, by Bampfylde Moore Carew. This Leverbox recording is in the public domain. Mr. Carew being in the town of South Molton in Devon, and having been ill-used by a great officer, vulgarly called the Bellman, was resolved to take comical revenge. It was about that time reported and generally believed that a gentleman of the town, lately buried, walked by night in the churchyard, and as the bellman was obliged by his nightly duty to go through it just at the hour of 1, that well-known accustomed time of spectres issuing from their graves, Mr. Carew repaired there a little before the time, and stripping to his shirt, lay down upon the gentleman's grave. Soon after, hearing the bellman approach, he raised himself up with a solemn slowness, which the bellman beholding, by the glimmering light of the moon, through some thick clouds, he was harrowed up, as Shakespeare expresses it, with fear and wonder, and an universal palsy seized every limb. But as nature most commonly dictates flight in all such cases, he retreated with as much haste as his shaking limbs would allow. Yet as fear naturally inclines us to look back upon the object we are flying from, he several times cast his eyes behind him, and beheld the ghost follow him with a solemn march. This added fresh vigour to his flight, so that he tumbled over graves and stones, not without many bruises, and at length dropped his bell, which the ghost seized upon as trophy, and forbore any farther pursuit. The bellman, however, did not stop till he reached home, where he obstinately affirmed he had seen the gentleman's ghost, who had taken away his bell, which greatly alarmed the whole town, and there were not wanting many who afterwards frequently heard the ghost ringing the bell in the churchyard. It was some time before the bellman had the courage to resume his usual nightly rounds through the churchyard, but after a while, his fear abating, he ventured upon it again, and met with no interruption. Mr. Carew, happening about a year afterwards to be in South Molton again, was afresh insulted by the bellman, which made him resolve to give him a second meeting in the churchyard. Taking therefore the opportunity of a very dark night, he dressed himself in a black gown, put a great fur cap upon his head, and at the usual time of the bellman coming, repaired to the churchyard, holding in his mouth by the middle a stick lighted at both ends, at the same time rattling a heavy iron chain. If the bellman's terror before was great, it was now much greater, and indeed the appearance joined to the rattling of the chain was so hideous, that the boldest soldier might have been terrified by it, without any imputation of cowardice. The bellman fled away with all the wings of fear, the spectre following him at a distance, rattling the chain with a most hideous noise. Hence the bellman concluded himself to be haunted by the devil, and declined ever after his nocturnal employment. About this time Mr. Carew met with one Mr. Phillips, a celebrated limner in Porlock, who showed him a great many pictures of different likenesses, and asked him if he knew any of them. He pointed out his old schoolfellow Edward Dyke, Esquire, and Sir Thomas Carew. Mr. Phillips then asked him if he would sit for his picture, as he had been desired to draw it for Mr. Copplestone Bampfylde, which our hero agreeing to, he went the next day and the following to sit for the picture undisguised. When it was finished, Mr. Phillips desired him to come again another time in his mumping dress, which he accordingly promised to do. After this he went to Minehead, and called on several of his old acquaintance, viz. Dr. Bell, Parson Beer, and the collector, who all treated him very kindly. Having raised contributions from these gentlemen, he repaired to his quarters, and desired them to lend him a pair of trousers. Having a mind to try some of the neighbouring county parishes, he pretended to be a castaway seaman, 3500 miles from home, and picked up a great deal of money, and 7 or 8 pounds of bacon, which he brought to his quarters, and gave as a recompense for the loan of the trousers. Some days after he met with an old female acquaintance, who had a young child with her, at a place called Embercombe, with whom joining company they came into Dunster, and lay at private lodgings. The next day, being willing to indulge his companion, he borrowed her child, a gown, and one of her petticoats. Thus accoutred, with the child in his arms, he returned to Minehead among the gentlemen he had so lately received contributions from. and pretending to be an unfortunate woman whose house had been burnt at Chadley, and giving a good account of that place and its inhabitants to those who questioned him, coughing very violently, and making the child cry, he got a great deal of money, clothes for the child, and victuals. On his return to Dunster, he gave the mother of the child the clothes, and the greatest part of the money he had obtained in his trip. Neither was this method new to him, for he had long before this taught his own daughter, a little infant, to say, drowned in a boat, as often as he or any other person asked her what was become of her mother or mammy. Having made her perfect in this lesson, he set out with her upon his back, and pretended to have been a sailor on board a vessel that had been lately lost on the coast of Wales, when most of the ship's crew and passengers were drowned, among whom he said was the mother of the tender infant at his back, and that he had saved himself and the infant by swimming. By this story he pocketed a great deal of money everywhere, especially, as by way of confirmation, when he was telling of it, he would turn and ask the babe, "Where is your poor mammy, my dear, my jewel?" To which the babe would reply, "Drowned in the boat," which so affected all that heard it, that it not only drew their purse, but their tears also. From Dunster he went through the country to Ilfracombe, where he inquired for a passage to Ireland. He was told there was no vessel going to Ireland, but that he might have a passage for Wales, which he soon resolved upon, and having waited upon the collector and some other friends in Ilfracombe, set sail for Swansea. He had no sooner landed there, than he repaired to the Reverend Mr. Griffy of that place, in the character of a castaway seaman, a native of Devonshire; and as he gave a particular account of Mr. Griffy's son, the minister of Bishop's Nympton, he was made very welcome and handsomely relieved, and by his recommendations obtained a great deal of money in the town. From thence he went in the same character to Lord Mansell's, at Calbridge, and other places, and returned to Swansea. Thence he set out again, travelling through the country to Tenby, where hearing of one Captain Lot, he waited upon him with the same story, but with the addition of his name being John Lot, whereby he soon got half a crown and a good welcome. He next set out for Carmarthen, and raised a great deal of money from the Welsh gentry, pretending now to be an unfortunate sailor belonging to Ireland, who had been cast away near Portland Race, coming from Bilboa. He proceeded upon the same story to Aberystwyth and Port Ely, where he chanced to meet with a brother of the mendicant order, to whom he was well known. They inquired of each other's success, and many other particulars, and agreed to join company for some time. Mr. Carew now got a cerecloth of pitch, which he laid to his arms, with a raw beefsteak at the top, covered over with white bread and tar, which has the exact appearance of a green wound. They still continued in the same story of being cast away, but added to it that he had fallen off the rigging and wounded his arm in that manner. They travelled together with good success as far as Shadwell, where they parted company. Our hero made the best of his way to Holyhead, and begging a passage on board the packet to Dublin, after a fine trip landed at King's End, near that city. His first inquiry here was for an old acquaintance, and in particular for one Mr. Crabbe, and Lord Annesley, who had been schoolfellows with him at Tiverton. He found my Lord Annesley lived a mile from the town, but did not see him the first day, being gone to Blessington, as the servants told him. Accordingly he set out for that town the next day, where he found my lord at a tavern with several officers. He went in and told the tavern keeper he wanted to speak with his lordship, but as his appearance was none of the best, the tavern keeper did not like to deliver this message to my lord, but asked what his business was. "Tell him," said he, "that I am an old schoolfellow of his, and want to see him." My lord, being told this, came out with two gentlemen, and inquired who he was, which our hero told him. "Ah, Mr. Carew," said his lordship, "is it you, mon? Walk in, walk in." "What," said one of the captains, "is this old Carew?" "The very same," replied my lord. After he had sat down for some time, and talked over several old affairs with my lord, one of the captains asked him if he could get him a good pointer. "Ay, ay, that he can," replied his lordship, for by my soul, mon, he and I have stolen many a dog, and lain in many a hay tallet, in our youthful days. Then turning to Mr. Carew, he told his fame was spread as much in Ireland as in England. Indeed it is so, replied one of the captains. His lordship then asked him how he found him out there. He replied he had been directed there by their old schoolfellow Crab. Well, said my lord, you shall go home along with me. He desired to be excused, as he designed to go and see my Lord Sellinger, who was another of his schoolfellows. But my lord swore by his soul he should go home along with him, and visit Lord Sellinger another time. Accordingly, a good horse was provided for him, and they all set out for Dublin. The next day my Lord Annesley took him to his own house. During his abode here, which was about a fortnight, our hero received great civilities from the Irish gentry, Lord Annesley introducing him to all the chief company in the city, as the man they had heard so much talk of. One day Mr. O'Brien, a gentleman of great fortune, being in company, asked Mr. Carew if he had ever been on board the Yarmouth man of war. He replied that he had been in her up the Baltic. The gentleman asked if he remembered a young gentleman about 14 years of age, very fat, and who had a livery servant to wait on him. He replied that he remembered him very well, and that he was blessed with as beautiful a face as any youth he ever saw. The gentleman then asked him if he recollected what became of him, which he answered by saying he died at Gosport a day or two after they landed, and that Mr. Price of Poole composed a Latin epitaph for him, at which the gentleman could not refrain letting fall some tears, it being his own brother he was speaking of. He then asked what men of war were with them at that time, all which he gave a very good account of, saying Sir Charles Wager and Rear Admiral Walton commanded, Sir Charles carrying a red flag at the foretopmost head of the Torbay, and the latter a blue at the mizzen of the Cumberland, both 80-gun ships. The gentleman replied he was satisfied, for he had given a very faithful account of everything. He then made Mr. Carew a present to drink his health when he came to England, as Lord Annesley said he would supply him with while he was in Ireland. A great hunting match being proposed, Lord Annesley told them that Mr. Carew could make one with the best of them at that diversion, upon which he was desired to make one of the party. Accordingly they set out very early next morning, and had fine sport, he exerting all his abilities, though he was afraid of riding into some bogs, of which the country is full. When the chase was ended, they all went to Lord Annesley's to dinner, and the company allowed him to be an excellent sportsman. Lord Annesley afterwards took him to Newry, and many other places, introducing him to much company. At length he desired liberty to go and see his old schoolfellow Lord Sellinger at Doneraile, which Lord Annesley could not consent to unless he promised to call upon him again on his return, which agreeing to do, he sent his servant with him as far as Blessington. Parting with the servant here, he travelled to Kilkenny, thence to Cashel, which is a fine seat belonging to Lord Marcair, Clonmel, and Cahir, where our hero was taken dangerously ill. It would be unpardonable not to mention the hospitality he was treated with here. His good landlady, finding him so ill, sent for the minister of the place to come and pray by him, which he accordingly did, and at going away clapped half a crown into his hand, and soon after sent an apothecary to him, who administered what medicines were proper for him, which had so good an effect as to enable him to get upon his legs. However, they would not let him proceed forward for several days, lest he should relapse, and before he set out, the minister of the parish sent his clerk round the place to make a collection for the stranger. At length, being perfectly recovered, he set out for Lord Sellinger's. When he came there and was introduced, my lord presently recollected him, and cried, Why, sure, and doubly sure, it is Carew. He then asked how long he had been in Ireland, adding, he hoped he would stay with him for some time. His lordship made him very welcome, and they talked over some of the merry pranks they had played together. Mr. Carew inquired if Sir Matthew Day, another of their old schoolfellows, was alive. His lordship told him he was dead, but that there was a young gentleman would be glad to see any old friend of his father's. He abode with Lord Sellinger about a fortnight, being entertained in the kindest manner possible. At his departure, my lord made him a handsome present, and gave him a good suit of clothes, with a recommendatory letter to young Mr. Day. Here he was received with great civility, as well upon account of Lord Sellinger's letter, as being an old schoolfellow of Mr. Day's father. The conversation happening to turn upon dogs, Mr. Day told him he had heard he was very famous for enticing dogs away, and that Sir William Courtenay's steward had told him there was not a dog could resist his allurements. However, he believed he had one that would. He then ordered a surly morose dog to be brought out, and offered to lay a wager he could not entice him away, which he readily accepted, and began to whistle to the dog, but found him very surly, upon which he took out a little bottle, and dropping a few drops upon a bit of paper, held it unseen to the dog, and then told Mr. Day the dog would follow him to England. Away then he went, and the dog after him. Mr. Day and his servants all followed, calling Roger, Roger, which was the name of the dog; but Roger turning a deaf ear to all they could say, not thinking proper to turn about once. Mr. Carew, having diverted himself sufficiently, was leading Mr. Day and his servants above half a mile, turned back again with the dog still following him. Having abode here some days, he took his leave, receiving a handsome present from Mr. Day, and then returned back to Lord Annesley, and thence to Kinsale, where he took the first opportunity of a vessel, and landed at Padstow in Cornwall, after a short and pleasant passage. From this place he went to Camelford, thence to Great Torrington, where he met with his wife, and then proceeded to Biddeford, and on the next day, being Sunday, he strolled down to one Holmes, who kept a public house between Biddeford and Appledore, where he passed great part of the day, drinking pretty freely, and money being at a low ebb with him, he desired landlord Holmes to lend him a good suit of clothes, which he accordingly did. Being thus gallantly equipped, he went and planted himself at the church door in Biddeford, and pretending to be the supercargo of a vessel which had been a few days before cast away near the Lizard, he got a very handsome contribution. From thence he travelled to Barnstaple, where he had great success, none suspecting him in his dress, as it was certainly known such a ship had been really cast away near the Lizard a few days before. Returning back, he called upon Squire Ackland at Tremington, where he got half a crown of the lady upon the same story. Then steering to Appledore, he met with landlord Holmes, who had been in no little fear about his clothes. However, he would not disrobe till he got to Appledore, where also he added to his store, and then returning to Holmes, he restored him his clothes, and gave him some small part of the profit of the excursion. It was about this time Mr. Carew became acquainted with the Honourable Sir William Wyndham in the following manner. Being at Watchet, in Somersetshire, near the seat of this gentleman, he was resolved to pay him a visit. Putting on therefore a jacket and a pair of trousers, he made the best of his way to Orchard Wyndham, Sir William's seat, and luckily met with him Lord Bolingbroke and several other gentlemen and clergy, with some commanders of vessels walking in the park. Mr. Carew approached Sir William with a great deal of seeming fearlessness and respect, and with much modesty acquainted him he was a Silverton man, which parish chiefly belonged to Sir William, and that he was the son of one of his tenants named Moore, that he had been at Newfoundland, and in his passage homeward the vessel was run down by a French ship in a fog, and only he and two more saved, and being put on board an Irish vessel, he was carried into Ireland, and from thence landed at Watchet. Sir William, hearing this, asked him a great many questions concerning the inhabitants of Silverton, who were most of them his own tenants, and of the principal gentlemen in the neighbourhood, all of whom Mr. Carew was perfectly well acquainted with, and therefore gave satisfactory answers. Sir William at last asked him if he knew Bickley, which is but a small distance from Silverton, and if he knew the parson there. Mr. Carew replied he knew him very well, and indeed so he might, as it was no other than his own father. Sir William then inquired what family he had, and whether he had not a son called Bampfylde, and what was become of him. Your honour, replied he, means the mumper and dog stealer. I don't know what has become of him, but it is a wonder he is not hanged by this time. "No, I hope not," replied Sir William. "I should be very glad for his family's sake to see him at my house." Having satisfactorily answered many other questions, Sir William generously relieved him with a guinea, and Lord Bolingbroke followed his example. The other gentlemen and clergy contributed, according to their different ranks, which they were the more inclined to do, as the captains found he could give a very exact account of all the settlements, harbours, and most noted inhabitants of Newfoundland. Sir William then ordered him to go to his house, and tell the butler to see him well entertained, which he accordingly did, and he set himself down with great content and satisfaction. But our enjoyments are often so suddenly dashed, that it has become a proverb, that many things happen between the cup and the lip; and Mr. Carew found it so, for while he was in the midst of his regale, he saw enter, not the ghost of bloody Banquo to take his seat from him, nor yet the much more tremendous figure of Mr. Tom Jones, in a light coloured coat covered with streams of blood. No, but the footpost from Silverton, with letters to Sir William. This proved to be little less than a very sharp sword hanging by a hair over Mr. Carew's head; for, as he thought it natural Sir William would ask him some questions about Mr. Moore, and as he did not choose, though he had passed Sir William's strict examination, to undergo a fresh one, he made great haste to rise from table and set out without using much ceremony. A few miles distant from hence he met Dr. Poole going from Dulverton to Sir William's, who, knowing Mr. Carew, stopped his horse to talk to him. Amongst other conversation at Sir William's, the doctor happened to mention whom he had met that day, not knowing that he had been lately there. It was soon known by the description he gave of his person and habit to be no other than the unfortunate Silverton man, to whom Sir William and his friends had been so generous, which occasioned a great deal of mirth. About 2 months after, Mr. Carew again ventured to pay his honour a second visit, in the habit and character of an unfortunate grazier. He met the worthy baronet and his lady taking the air in a chaise, in a meadow where some haymakers were then at work. He approached them with a great deal of modest simplicity, and began a very moving tale of the misfortunes he had met with in life. In the midst of his oration, Sir William called to the haymakers to secure him, which struck his eloquence dumb, or at least changed it from the pathetic to the tragic style, for he could not conceive what might be the end of this. However, the baronet soon gave him a choice of either a true confession of his name and profession, or a commitment to prison. He made choice of the former, and confessed himself to be Bampfylde Moore Carew, sovereign of the whole community of mendicants. Sir William, with a great deal of good nature, treated him with all that respect which is due to royalty, entertained him generously at his house, and made him a very handsome present at his departure, desiring him to call upon him as he came that way, and he was ever a constant friend and benefactor to him. Chapter 15.